Funding for the production of Louisiana, the state we're in, is provided in part by the Ziegler Foundation of Jennings, Gulf States Utilities, helping Louisiana bridge the gap to our energy future, and the Kaiser Aluminum and Chemical Corporation.
Good evening, I'm Beth George. Welcome to this edition of Louisiana, the state we're in. This week, concern over two national issues came home to Louisiana. We'll have reports on a presidential commission investigating ways to handle the problem of drunk drivers. And we'll also examine what lies behind a new initiative for nuclear disarmament. From those very real problems, we'll move to the far pleasanter prospect of viewing LSU football on a fall evening, as we take a look at plans to form a Tiger Athletic television network. And finally, we'll visit the governor's mansion, where some old-fashioned gospel singing was mixed with some down-home politicking. But first, we have this wrap-up of politics as usual at the state capitol. There were continued protests this week over the governor's order to cut state budgets by 4.4%. On Monday, labor leaders held a press conference asking the governor to reconsider his plans to reduce funding for public universities. And on Thursday, Southern University officials persuaded a committee overseeing the desegregation plan for the state's universities to join their protest against budget reductions. LSU officials will join this chorus of concern at a special board meeting this weekend. Trine has listened to these recommendations, but so far has insisted that the state's declining revenues requires this action to keep the budget in balance. What was once a front-page story for much of the last legislative session hit the front pages again this week. State Senate President Michael O'Keefe was convicted on July 1st of mail fraud and obstruction of justice. But this week, a federal judge ordered a new trial for O'Keefe. District Judge Frederick Hebe based his decision on the closing arguments of U.S. Attorney John Volz, saying that Volz overstepped his limits in his zeal for a conviction. O'Keefe now has the opportunity for another day in court, and it looks as if he's assured of keeping his position as Senate President while all of the legal battles continue. Not all legal battles take place in the courtroom. Last year, the legislature debated at great length changes in the state's laws concerning drunk driving. This week was declared DWI Awareness Week by Governor Trine, but what might have been merely symbolic turned into a very serious discussion of what many see as a serious national problem. Robin Eckings has a report on a presidential commission meeting in Baton Rouge and a look at another national issue, that of nuclear disarmament.
According to the U.S. Department of Transportation, an average of 1 million traffic accidents in the United States every year are alcohol-related, and about 25,000 people die as a result of those collisions. That's about 68 deaths a day. The Transportation Department also claims that out of every 500 to 2,000 drunk drivers on the road, only one is arrested, and even then the penalty is likely to be light. With rising statistics and pressure from citizens groups to do something about the grim figures, the Reagan administration moved last spring to form a drunk driving task force to examine the nationwide problem. At a meeting this week in Baton Rouge, one of 10 scheduled around the country, the panel heard what state officials had to say about Louisiana's particular problems.
And while people might think that it's easy to mobilize sentiment against this sort of thing, and indeed most all people view it with horror, getting action to do something about it is sometimes quite a different thing.
Louisiana ranks third in the nation in the number of alcohol-related deaths on the road. With a growing membership of several anti-drunk driving groups across the state, like Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, Governor Trine and his forces were able to mobilize well enough this past summer to get several new drunk driver penalties approved by the legislature. Some local officials have been wondering, however, if the effort to back up the new legislation will be a totally different thing. As of the first of the year, convicted drinking drivers will be faced with mandatory jail terms or community service work. Third-time offenders will have no choice but to go to jail. For the many communities already faced with overflowing facilities, the new law will mean nothing without more space. At this week's commission meeting, Chairman John Volpe told reporters that the task force will help produce model legislation that states may adopt, and the federal government will have extra highway safety grants for states who get tough with drinking drivers, but no money to help build jails for offenders. The news came as no surprise to Governor Treen, who repeated a pledge to find the money in the state's shrinking budget.
Right. I don't think we're going to expect any massive funds from the federal government or any appreciable funds from the federal government for our drunk driving program. I've said repeatedly, if I've got to make the funds available out of the Public Works Fund in order to provide places to house these people, and they can, of course, be housed in minimum security areas, we're not worried about them escaping particularly. If they do that, they'll just be subject to another term, and so I don't think that's going to happen. So I don't think this is going to be all that expensive. But whatever it takes, whether it's Public Works funds or an appropriation at the next session of the legislature specifically for this, we're going to do that.
Governor Treen also told the Presidential Commission that he hopes to come back in the 1983 regular legislative session with some of the DWI measures the legislature rejected this year. One of those, he said, will probably be a proposed statewide ban on open containers of alcohol on the roads. Commission Chairman John Volpe, former Secretary of Transportation, says a lack of restriction is a sad commentary, a remark he made without knowing how loose Louisiana's current law is.
That is bad, but in one state in this nation, you can go to a gas station. Maybe there are other states. I know of one state where you can go to a gas station, and while your tank is being filled with gasoline, they can buy their beer or their wine or mixes and drink while they're filling the gas tank up with gasoline, and then drive off with beer cans in their hands. Now, I guess they do that as far as having a beer can in their hands because that's what the open container is. But at least as far as I know, you can't get it at a gas station, which I think is even worse.
That's Louisiana. You can do that here as well.
Even at a gas station?
Yes, you can.
I'm surprised to hear it, but...
Chairman Volpe says even though Louisiana needs more, like some sort of an open container law, the new legislation that's been passed shows a strong effort by Louisiana officials to attack the drunk driver problem. But Volpe adds that effort must be followed up with action.
Anytime you pass a law that either can't be enforced because of the magnitude of the problem or the fact that you just don't have the numbers of police or courts or jails to handle it, then you're wasting time and you are just kidding the public along. So it's well to pass laws, and some states need stiffer laws. But there are other states that have good laws but don't enforce them. So I say enforce the laws you have on the books first and then add the laws that you feel are needed, additional laws, as those seem to be something that you can really perform with and not just be another law that's on the books that nobody pays any attention to.
As the Presidential Commission was wrapping up its work in Baton Rouge, another group was just beginning their task of trying to bring attention to another life and death national issue. This week was also Disarmament Week as declared by the United Nations. In Baton Rouge, members of the Center for Disarmament Education gathered at the main post office to hand out literature calling for nuclear arms control. Group members also turned in special change of address cards the post office has issued. Cards that allow you to tell the federal government where you'd like your mail sent if your home or business is destroyed by a nuclear blast.
We think the whole concept of mail forwarding after a nuclear war is absurd and demonstrates a very shallow thinking about the results of a nuclear war. And so we've done this as a symbolic gesture of how we feel civil defense is a rather absurd effort, number one, and also a gesture to show that civil defense is not really the answer to the problem that's confronting us. Disarmament is the answer.
Another group concerned about the growing threat of nuclear war and the horrors it would bring is Common Cause. Jay Hedlund lobbies in Washington for the Citizens Group. Hedlund says Common Cause joined the disarmament move as a reaction to the early, tough military talk days of the Reagan administration. Increasing alarm that hardline policy and large increases in defense spending will draw the country into a nuclear war has already prompted 10 states and over 800 other governmental bodies to pass some sort of resolution calling for arms control. Lobbyist Jay Hedlund says he thinks those actions have helped moderate the administration's hard line, but he adds that continued efforts to educate and involve the public in arms control, like Disarmament Week, are necessary.
I think it's important for people to realize that this has to be a sustained effort. No one magic step is going to stop the risk of nuclear war. What we want to do is do a step-by-step process of putting on controls, of minimizing the risk. And that can be done through things like the freeze resolution, through a sharper eye towards the Defense Department budget, by more vigorous questioning of the various weapons proposals, the MX missile proposal that's coming up. A number of serious questions have been raised about that proposal over a series of years. Well, then let's stop funding for it. Let's not put that into a situation where it destabilizes the relationship between our arsenal and the Soviet Union's arsenal.
Hedlund also says Congress and the President need to act on treaties that have been negotiated with the Soviets but not signed, like the SALT II treaty. Hedlund says although the bomb may not fall tomorrow, the technology to do it is there, and everyone must realize they have a stake in that technology's awesome ability.
Well, matters of life and death seldom occupy our day-to-day contemplations. They are perhaps too real to confront directly. We often transfer our real fears and frustrations onto our playing fields. Nowhere is that preoccupation taken more seriously than on an LSU football weekend. Many of you may be planning to attend LSU's game this weekend, while some of you may be able to watch it at home on television. David Young tells us about LSU's plans to cash in on a new concept of a pay cable television network.
There's little doubt that LSU Tiger football has become the pastime for thousands and thousands of Louisianians. The only problem is that on any given Saturday night, only 77,000 of the more fortunate ones are able to get into the stadium itself. So with the rise in popularity of football and other sports, LSU officials have embarked upon a bold experiment using the magic of television.
There's no question that when the Tigers are winning, and most times when they are not, the faithful fans of Louisiana State University are packed into the stadium come fall and football season. It is for most more than a sports event, but a social event for which they will travel from miles around to attend. But the stadium has been enlarged about as much as possible, and with the popularity of Tiger football growing each year, LSU athletic officials have seen the wave of the future to satisfy the demand, and it is pay TV.
The future of all sports is pay television. That will come down the line, but all the economists, all the marketing analysts, everybody else that puts it all together, that's the future of all sports as far as television goes. It will be pay television.
When this man walked into the athletic director's office following the resignation of Paul Dietzel, Louisianians knew very little about him. He is obviously sports-oriented, but Brodhead brought with him to Baton Rouge experience in managing finances for two major pro football teams and the experience of being a company president. In short, his game plan for LSU sports is to put it on a business basis. So barely settled into his office, he has already created the humble beginnings of a statewide LSU sports cable network. If successful, the first of its kind in the nation.
That's right, that's right. It's a mini pay cable network that LSU is producing, is basically what it is. Well, there's two different theories here. Select event, pay-per-view, whatever you want to call it, is an extension of our stadium. We have 77 some odd thousand seats and could use 125,000 seats. There's such a demand for Tiger football. Over the years, people have been able to see Tiger football. So it's a service to the fans, and it's an economic benefit to the university and to the athletic department to make this available. We're making it available to the fans on cable television as an extension of the stadium. So basically, although that seems oversimplified, that's really what it is. Tiger Vision's a different thing. Tiger Vision is not only football and basketball on a tape, delayed basis. Tiger Vision is also the promotion of the non-revenue sports: tennis, golf, wrestling, track, women's basketball, women's volleyball, right down the line of all 19 other sports besides football and basketball.
Besides being an excellent promotional and recruiting tool, Brodhead hopes that future television revenues from major sports such as football and basketball will also bring revenue in for the so-called minor college sports. The LSU athletic program is self-sustaining as it receives no money from the state or the university. Under the new system, it will receive 50% of all the TV profits.
Well, when you're in a self-sustaining mode of operation, you try to maximize your revenues at all times. Of course, we are faced with stadium repairs. We're faced with increasing costs to feed the athletes. We're faced with increasing tuition costs, et cetera, that are involved with the payment that we make to the university for our scholarship athletes. It's a never-ending spiral. The inflationary spiral hits the athletic department just as it does any other walk of life. So there's always a need to maximize revenues.
To accomplish this goal, Brodhead has employed the services of Baton Rouge Cablevision. The company's president, Dr. Tony Currier, says Cablevision has the camera equipment and production facilities to broadcast the game live and to produce the sports for Tiger Vision. They have expanded their facilities to service the LSU project, but Currier thinks the risk is well worth it.
We had already committed the money to the new equipment. We had 2 years of study on how we wanted to do it. We had almost all the cameras we needed in place, and they are of network quality. We had to purchase another camera and a slow motion machine and a few things, but basically our capital expenditures were in place. And it was just a real appropriate time for Mr. Brodhead to come to the community as far as we were concerned. LSU provides the product, they provide the team. We provide the capital, if you will, to make it work. So LSU is at no chance of losing money in the venture. We at Cablevision are. We're willing to take that risk because we think it's a good product.
Because of NCAA rules, Currier says the live broadcast of the games will not be allowed in any Louisiana city where other major colleges are playing. It will obviously take years to wire Louisiana for Tiger sports. According to Currier, this small box is a ticket. He says it is now only being offered in Baton Rouge, and only a few thousand subscribers have it. But of those who do, nearly 1,000 signed up last Saturday night to see LSU's first pay-per-view game. And in case you're wondering if it hurts attendance, it doesn't. On this night, LSU recorded a record turnout in Tiger Stadium. But with this Tocom box, Cablevision can use a computer to turn you on to the broadcast, turn you off after, and bill you for it at the end of the month. So how much will it cost to watch LSU sports when you can get it at home?
The ticket cost is $19.50. That price was set by the university on the rationale that it's 1.5 times the cost of a stadium ticket per person. And quite frankly, I think you would agree that very rarely does one person sit in front of that TV set and watch an LSU football game. It's at least a family affair, if not a neighborhood affair. So I think the price per person is very reasonable, and that's LSU's decision to make it at $19.50, and we certainly concur with that.
So LSU fans in the Baton Rouge area can already watch LSU football and basketball games broadcast live. And 6 hours of all types of sports called Tiger Vision is slated to hit the airways in January of next year. So what does all that mean for other cable systems around the state?
Well, we're going to have a technological explosion, I think, in this state. I think the other systems will be, cable systems will be compelled to put in the technology we have, because I think the subscribers are going to demand LSU sports.
But let's ask the real connoisseur of sport, the fan, what he or she thinks about watching the game at home.
I would come to the ball game if I had a ticket. It's pretty exciting, but I would watch it if I didn't have a ticket.
No, I would come because of all the excitement and being here. It's not the same sitting in front of a tube.
I'd come to the game. It's more exciting.
Come to the game also for the excitement. I think I'd watch it here because they have season tickets, season tickets.
Obviously, there is no substitute for being in Tiger Stadium on Saturday night, but with the demand for LSU tickets far exceeding the supply, LSU officials are banking that having a video ticket will be the next best thing.
Well, if football attracts crowds in Louisiana, so does good food and good music. Last weekend at the governor's mansion, the food may have been plain, but the music was rich and plentiful. It was an old-fashioned gospel sing, and Robin Eckings was there to report on the event and the politicians who attended.
It wasn't a funeral, it wasn't a football game. What else could bring the governor, 3 of his predecessors, and several thousand others together on a crisp, clear autumn afternoon? What else but a good old-fashioned gospel sing? A chance to showcase some of the nation's top inspirational talent, as well as some who admitted having more inspiration than talent. It was the first public gospel singing day at the governor's mansion in 14 years, a tradition started by former Governor John McKithen, who held 3 during his 8-year term.
Singing, I have always enjoyed good gospel singing, and I had some relatives who had been active in it, and through them I met some of the leaders in the gospel singing groups of the state, and when I ran for governor, nearly all of them were for me, and I told them when I ran that if I should be elected, I would invite them here. We'd have a gospel singing here. And so then at the first one, we had several here. And Governor Treen asked me to come here and join him, and I believe he called it co-chairman. I told him I'd be delighted to.
They brought their lawn chairs from all across Louisiana, particularly the central and northern parts of the state. Some even traveled from Texas, Mississippi, and Tennessee to hear their favorites, like the Masters 5 and the man who bills himself as the world's deepest bass, J.D. Sumner.
It's shining bright on me.
In all, more than 20 groups were invited to perform during the 5-hour concert. The food, if you were willing to wait a bit, flowed as freely as the music. All of it was donated by local businesses or paid for by private contributions. Most of the labor was volunteer, including some administration staff members who received a private inspirational performance of their own as they worked in the mansion kitchen by whom else but the Inspirations of Bryson City, North Carolina.
Someday, someday we shall see Jesus, someday by and by. Someday, I shall behold him in that city on high. We must not linger, we must keep moving. Jesus is leading the way. Shouting and singing, joy bells ring. We shall see heaven someday.
Governor Treen's employees weren't the only ones finding new ways to work with gospel music. Outside on stage, the governor was taking some lessons from an old master, former Governor Jimmy Davis.
Like they used to, since I laid my burden down. They don't treat me like they used to, since I laid my burden down. Glory, glory, hallelujah, when I laid my burden down.
Those lessons, however, proved a little tougher to learn than those taught in the mansion kitchen. Governor Treen, however, was not discouraged. Admitting he was nothing but a rank amateur, he plunged in with his own rendition of Amazing Grace.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Painful as some of those tones may have been to the ear, all eyes were soaking in that performance, as well as a later reprise by a quartet of the state's chief executives, past and present. This was not lost on Governor Treen's campaign staff, although strategist John Cade says the administration has been planning its own gospel sing since it took office nearly 3 years ago. With barely 12 months left to the '83 elections, there hardly seemed a better time to get fresh videotape for the campaign library. A production crew from Houston recorded every homespun minute. And the governor wasn't the only one promoting himself or seeming to have a good time. Some of those who'd been present at the gospel sings of old said things looked very familiar.
Oh, it looks exactly the same. Amazingly enough, the people who love gospel music sort of remain the same over the years.
And you must enjoy gospel music yourself to be coming back.
Well, I'm a good old Baptist, and if you grew up a Baptist church, you can't help but like gospel singing.
So although some say it can't be done, politics and religion did seem to mix rather well for those on hand at the governor's mansion Sunday. It could have been that the success of the event was due largely to the gospel singing talent taken straight from the top.
All right, let's take it from the top, the first verse again. All right. Sing grace, how sweet the sound.
But then again,
A wretch like me, I once was lost, and now I am found, was blind.
We aren't normally in the business of doing musical reviews on the state we're in, but next week we are going to give you a preview of what might be the most highly orchestrated governor's race in the state's history. Next week, a look at what former Governor Edwin Edwards and present Governor Dave Treen are doing to ensure that they will be conducting the state's business when the next governor's race rolls around. Until then, I'm Beth George. Thank you for joining us. Good night.
Funding for the production of Louisiana, the state we're in, is provided in part by the Ziegler Foundation of Jennings, Gulf States Utilities, helping Louisiana bridge the gap to our energy future, and the Kaiser Aluminum and Chemical Corporation.